Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on supercharging retail growth with GIS data. We are so excited to get going with this, and I just wanted to do a quick introduction about myself. My name is Ruthie Senanayaka. I am the events manager at Blueprint Technologies, and if you have any questions about getting a recording after or anything like that, you can always email info@bpcs.com and I will be sure to send that over to you. We'll also be posting the recording on our social media, so if you want to go ahead and follow our pages, we'll make sure to get that posted by tomorrow. I'd love to introduce our panelists and guest speaker today. So today I will first kick things off with Thomas Shaw. Can you give us a quick introduction about yourself and what you do at Blueprint?
Sure. Thomas Shaw, and I'm a regional director for the South Central region at Blueprint, and with mostly involved in client dev and account operations, but also just a long history in data and analytics. Excellent,
thank you. And Jason McCracken?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Ruthie. So my name is Jason McCracken. I'm the regional director overseeing the PNW and West Coast markets with a primary focus on retail, supply chain, and GIS data as it relates to how we can expand and make smarter retail decisions.
Thank you. And Paul, can you give us a little bit of information on Precisely and about you as well?
Sure. Paul Thompson. I'm a product management director here at Precisely, focusing on market planning and site selection solutions that are really targeted towards retailers, credit unions, banks, restaurants, but anything with a brick and mortar really needs a strategy. And I guess a little bit about Precisely is we are, kind of a data integrity company that has a wealth of location intelligence, data enrichment, data quality solutions, which really extract information from core systems and make sure that it's fit for purpose for making these real estate decisions. So that'll be kind of a focus of where I will focus most of my energies today.
Awesome, thank you so much. I just want to say a quick thank you to everyone who's joined us today, whether you're on Zoom or on Facebook Live, watching us on LinkedIn or Twitter. Thank you for taking the time to join with us today. If you have any questions for our panelists throughout the session, feel free to add that to our Q&A section, and if we have any at the end, we'll make sure to get to that. But without further ado, I will pass things along to Thomas Shaw. If you can get things started and also give us a quick intro about Blueprint, we will get started.
Sure. So thanks, Ruthie. And so I'm Thomas Shaw again, and with Blueprint, we are focused on digital transformation really across the enterprise in a number of industries, with a primary focus in data and analytics and how you can use data and analytics to enable that transformation, but also just achieve growth. It seems just to be the most common thread around all of our customers today. It's no longer maintaining status quo. Everybody's focused on growth, even in the wake of quarantine. Maybe not wake, but in the midst of it, I guess. But we are. It's really in how can you use data and the robust amount of data that you have available to you today to find the signal in the noise. So, Paul, if you'll go to the next one. What we really want to focus on in this robust data world is geospatial data and location intelligence. Historically, everybody thinks about when you're opening a restaurant or expanding your retail growth, it's always location, location, location. I don't think that's changed, even in the world of social media and IoT, that there's still so many other factors, but location is still as important as ever. And so just taking that location and taking it a step further, want to focus on today, which is geospatial data and the location intelligence that comes with that. And that's understanding just the insight, the decision-making, the predictability, and just adding layers upon layers of geographic data, whether it be demographics, traffic patterns, weather patterns, being able to do what-if modeling, understanding the trends in your area, and that's even real time. So in the multidimensional data world, whenever we take location, we want to take it over over all the layers of time possible and available to us. And then be able to understand that in real time, make real-time adjustments where feasible. In past webinars, we've talked about things like a tweet making a chicken sandwich craze. Well, you might not be able to adapt real time with that, but you sure can the next day. But anything, another thing we've talked about in the past, just traffic patterns. How can we understand where traffic patterns come into play and drive, whether it's restaurant activity or just a number of lights in an area, it's stoplights in an area, or beds in an area, things that the volume of people stopping in a certain area is going to drive traffic, right? And of course, corporations, timing, all these things. How can we use these things in this type of, this is all components of geospatial data, and then take federated data from a partner like we have in Precisely, which Paul can talk more about later, and how can we use that, and then Blueprint provides a vehicle with a modern data estate to understand how you can manage that robust data, and then take things from billions of devices that are connected to the Internet of Things today, and so the executives and decision makers have access to these unprecedented amounts of business data, and including this geospatial data. Still jump to the next one, Paul. This intelligence comes from this, visualizing, analyzing these volumes, location, technology, and it's really, it allows you to empower holistic planning, predictive analysis, problem solving, all the relevant information in the context of location on a smart map or an app or just an executive dashboard. What are the things how can I use this location data to empower and make more informed decisions, and it's really become transformative to a number of industries. We're really focused on retail today, but think of an oil and gas company, an exploration company. The more they can find out about an area and a location, and the more we can bring in, it's just making that even more scientific than ever. So that really comes with a maturity process. So this is something that's been around since really the start of BI and decision support making, and in a way that it improved and evolved since the 90s. One thing we've talked to our customers about it is going from reacting to more real-time predictive analysis to even being, just as prescriptive or cognitive as we have here. Not running your business in the rearview mirror anymore, but really anticipating what's coming based on historical trends, based on all the data you can that's possible, and using geospatial data just has opened up an entirely new realm of being able to be more accurate in that regard, and being able to understand what's coming before it happens, and just helping people in that maturity process. So this is the business version of it, and then we have what I like to call the nerd version of it. Is what does that mean? That goes from data acquisition, taking those billions of devices in IoT, social media, scrubbing it, monitoring it constantly, knowing that real-time traffic patterns. How do we acquire that? How do we engineer it? ELT, ETL, ETL's come a long way, and how do we? You don't have time to do complex transformations. Tools like Azure, a federated data source, things that Precisely giving you data in a consumable form, data virtualization. All these things have gone into engineering that allow you to now. Data's been cheap for a long time. We just didn't know how to process it and narrow it down. That's where data governance and master data management come into play. Governance is a bad word for a lot of folks. We like to call it personalization. Governance on the IT side is personalization on the customer side, right? And so we can take and understand what data is very relevant to this user, and that can be dynamic as well. And then taking it and putting it into a reporting and an analysis consumable form, so that as much as automated as possible, giving you KPIs, understanding what your KPIs are, and this process where the moment the data triggers an IoT device or social media, you are in that reporting and business intelligence stage real time. and making real-time decisions. And then that's where, once you're doing that and you're no longer spending that time in tedious data collection and acquisition, massaging activities, that time now becomes strategic. And with a data science layer or component added to it, now you're thinking more machine learning. The data is doing the work for you, and how you can look forward and be in that orchestrating stage that we talked about on the previous slide. So this is kind of the high level. I'm going to turn it over to Jason here today, talking specifically how we apply that in retail, and then what Precisely brings to the table as far as just robust data sets, and then of course why you need Blueprint to help manage that and create a vehicle for you to do that analysis.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Thomas. I appreciate you. So listen, speaking from experience, working in retail on the front lines for nearly 20 years, I'll tell you, there's an experiential shift that is happening on a grand scale when it comes to what the customers expect, what retailers are they're expected to deliver on, and also the data that the retailers need to meet that expectation. So we go to the next slide here. Just a quick primer on what's been happening in the last couple of years. So, you know, with 1.6 million retail establishments in the country, we're still trimming down on our employment in retail, but obviously 90% of retail transactions are still taking place in physical stores. So although the revenue is going down, there's still more transactions happening within the building. So what does that mean? That means that although there has been a fluctuation recently in the amount of employed and the amount of sales being generated, you know, as you can see, the spend has gone up by 0.3 trillion in the year, even though there's been a reduction in employment, and we're bouncing back from some previous limitations in the country and in the world for people to go to retail. The reason why I mention that is there used to be days where you could hand out coupons, you could stand outside with a clicker and count door swings. People were standing outside of doors with surveys and questions talking about what can we make your experience better and where your demographics and things like that. Well, the problem with those is they can't scale. So what was invented to attach to the coupon was digital marketing. What was invented to track door swings and conversion rates was things like shopper track and stuff like that. And so how do we get better in the next, with the next iteration, which is how do we get better at finding locations to build stores or pop-up shops? Go ahead into the next one, Paul. So when we're talking about digital transformation, when it comes to locations, take a company like Chase Bank, and there's a couple others that have created like small pop-up shops almost, where you can do your entire banking experience, but it's in a location that maybe was set up to just, you know, run during, you know, college rush week on a campus, right? But it's a fully functional branch, and it's just to get people set up. Well, you know, those kinds of things are happening all over with all markets. And all of those decisions on where to put those locations are highly generated by, you know, retail selection teams and real estate teams within given companies. But a lot of times what we find is they're missing a very important part, which is the enriched federated GIS data that we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Paul. We're going to talk a little bit. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Let me pause there. This will be our next, what's happening today. So right now, everybody is using technology. There's a lot of traceability on phones, whether you're going, no matter what supplier you have. A lot of your movement and your migration is being looked at from from a cell usage perspective, and being really enriched into using a lot of that data, as opposed to the person standing outside of the store taking in demographic data. A lot of that is being nurtured in a way that that is allowing it almost in the background, so it's low touch from a customer's perspective. What that allows retailers to do is look at the environments that are changing, like I said, the migrations that are changing, and even how far a customer is willing to travel from either their home or work to a specific retail location, and then using that to inform new real estate decisions. And so what's happening? Retailers and restaurants are responding. So, you still see some anchor stores out there and some anchor shopping centers, but I'm sure we can all point to a certain area or a certain part of our town where there's, a couple of shops that are popping up that maybe wouldn't typically be there. There's a lot of movement now, especially with the recent COVID and whatnot, that people are realizing that, hey, I don't have to live in a massive, urban sprawl or a downtown area to get close to not only work, but to the retail stores that I like to use. So they're looking to move out into more rural or more cost-effective spaces. And so retailers are responding to this. So rather than having, a massive, Olive Garden, for example, Olive Garden's looking at, okay, how can I make a little pop-up shop, and where would I do that? Where does it financially make sense to do so? And all of that is essential, or excuse me, is possible by using enriched GIS data. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand over to Paul. He's going to talk a little bit about what's going on with Precisely and how their data really helps supercharge our offer.
Jason, did you want to mention one big project?
Yeah, thank you for reminding me. Yeah. So the importance of GIS data cannot be understated. In my previous life, I worked, before I came to Blueprint, I worked at a very major telecom company. They have magenta in their color scheme. I'm sure you can do the math. And I actually was on the ground floor and was the employee number 2 of their home internet offering. And when we first started, we knew where our cell towers were, but had really zero understanding about human migration patterns, and just day-to-day traffic that rural markets were needing. And so that's we actually partnered with Precisely at that time and brought in their data, and their data in GIS is today still what's powering the customer selection tool for that entire ISP. So every customer is chosen, vetted, and then invited and then onboarded, not only based on cell tower data, which is obviously proprietary to that company, but it pairs in with the Precisely data that really helps enrich that traffic patterns, the geocodes that people live in, census blocks. All of that comes from Precisely, and it's really the key that makes that successful. Thank you, Paul, for that reminder. And with that, I'll hand it over to you and let you go from here.
Great, thanks, Jason. So to reinforce what Thomas and Jason have been saying is there are some fundamental shifts that are taking place within the data that's available to retailers and restaurants and any brick and mortar to be able to make some decisions. So rough penetration metrics are about 80+% of smartphone adoption. And really what that is accelerating that's accelerating the data democratization, the data creation. So citizens themselves are being the data creation engines, and retailers and others are being able to take advantage of that in a way that they were never able to in the past. And what's really happening as well is there is an acceleration to the digital transformation. Much of it was brought on by COVID because you really had no choice but to shop online or use alternative channels like buy online, curbside pickup, mobile-only ordering for restaurants, those types of things. So really, years have turned into months, and the companies that are really winning in this process are the ones that are back at what Thomas showed, the ones that are high on the maturity ladder. So they're the ones that have seen this coming. They've moved on the digital journey and they're quite far into that, and they're able to react to these decisions quite quickly. And so what we're seeing is an acceleration in the digital transformation spend overall, and that's continuing to progress. And we're seeing a lot of the laggards kind of move into and enhance their spending, because otherwise they're going to go out of business. And then what's also happening is we're seeing the old guard kind of disappear and be replaced with the new players. So JCPenney's and Sears, you know, old shopping centers, the C&D malls, they're being transformed into micro distribution centers, or, you know, large distribution centers, to really kind of cut down that last mile and be able to get, you know, same day delivery, or get as many customers as possible within a 1 to 2 day delivery window. So again, propagating that conversion. But as Jason had said before, there's still, the majority of transactions still take place in the store, but that interaction is changing from I'm just going to go in and buy, but I need to interact now. And so the level of intimacy usually within these stores is going up, because now they want to talk, they want to price compare. They're going to do all the price compare on the web, but when they go into a store, they really want to speak to somebody and kind of reinforce their decision. So there's a lot of transformation that's taking place, and it's really understanding the data that you have available to take advantage of that, to be able to build those processes, gain in maturity, and be able to react to these quite quickly. So, so just to talk on that, you know, I did mention the winners. The winners have a single view of the customer. They have a single view of the asset. They got that single view of the truth. And they're able to leverage this data that's available to pivot and be able to react quickly. And as the weaker players start to close, they can evaluate quickly which pieces of real estate to add to their portfolio in a very fast way, because you need to make those decisions to assume a lease very quickly during the disposition of weaker players' assets. And then, you know, what you see are companies being able to have that data and know where to allocate different channels to different stores, shift resources appropriately, because they understand their customers. So that it's that intimate relationship between e-com and the brick and mortar, because they do reinforce each other very well. And we've seen those impacts where brick and mortar close, e-com drop, brick and mortar open. Within certain markets, you see e-com go up as well. So they do move in unison to each other. So let's just continue on here. So let's focus in on the data side. So you can have all the analytical applications you want, but if you don't have data, you're not going to be able to do anything, right? And then, you know, one thing I always say is insight without execution is useless, right? You know something, but if you're not going to act on it, then why bother? So when we take a look at the various data elements, one of the really key things that are coming out is this idea of dynamic demographics. So these are your attitudes, purchasing power, your income, your behaviors. These things move with you as you move across the market. I know my kids walk around the market with my wallet. And then, you know, as I walk around, you know, when a restaurant wants to open up, they're not so concerned about the residential distribution of incomes. They want to know, what are the purchasing power or the incomes of the people that are moving across in front my door, or that potential real estate at a certain time of day when I would expect to do my peak trading for that part of the day. That's the information that they need. And if I go back in my career, about 10 years ago, I was asked this question by a restaurant. I said, we need to know the demographics of a certain group at a certain time of day, because that's our target. And I said, look, we can't answer that question. We need to model it. And that was before the advent of the mobile trace data. And now with the mobile trace data through dynamic demographics, you're able to look and say, I want to target these individuals. Where are they on a Monday afternoon during lunchtime? And how does that differ from a Sunday afternoon? So the whole idea of moving from static residential-based systems to dynamic is one of the key drivers. And I would advise all retailers to really look at that and adding that to their portfolio. And a lot of that is driven by the dynamic mobile trace data. So digital patterns, day of week, mobile movement data as people move around. But with all that new sexy data coming down, you can't ignore what you need to do as your homework assignment as retailers. You need to have good site attribute data. You can't just capture that during when you're opening up a piece of real estate. Keep it current because your formats will change. And then the idea of dynamic POI data as well. So as competitors open and close, you want to know that as shopping centers get remodeled to mixed use, you want to be able to understand that. And then, you know, the channel data. There's a proliferation of buy online, pick up in store, dine in, self-serve, mobile delivery only restaurants, drive-through, mobile only, Chipotlanes, those types of things, where you know, they're really trying to speed service of the customer. But all of that boils down to having a single view of an asset, single view of the truth, like we've talked about. And the customers that are at the peak of the maturity ladder, that's where they sit. They're able to answer these questions. And so what's the total customer value? What's the four-wall metrics that I've got for this store? So you can make a long-term lease decision or a short-term, or I'm going to dispose of that asset. And then, of course, where competitors are growing and contracting, gentrification areas, shifts in trade area demand, and then, of course, changes in tenant mix. So all of this is definitely key information. And a lot of it is driven by the ability to extract the insights from mobile movement as people move across the market. And you're able to layer that in with the common evening location of these devices to look at how economics and income and households move. And so if we look at one really good case here, Cameo Group 3, prosperous families. In the past and frankly currently, you look at the residential distribution, right, and you make your decisions. That would make this whole area void, right, if that was the only variable you're looking at in your real estate strategy. But if you look at a weekday afternoon distribution of how the people living in these areas move throughout the day, then these areas start to become much more attractive. And when you look at the inflows, the inflow is what's important if you're trading during the day versus you're targeting a residential consumer at the nighttime or on the weekends. You can see that the residential profile versus the inflow profiles are very different. So definitely take a look at that, because that can add a lot of value to your decisions on which piece of real estate to go with. To give you another idea, when we take a look at some of the new data sets that are helping retailers make decisions, it's activity data. So think of this as a surrogate for pedestrian activity, whether they're driving or walking, they're carrying a device, and that device is pinging, and that movement data is being captured. It's all GDPR compliant. It's all security compliant. There's no PII information here. What we're looking for is movement of groups of people to understand where they are. Now, what we're not here, we're not overlaying income here. This is just pure movement of devices. And this is turning out to be a very attractive variable when we start forecasting restaurants or retailers which are really impacted by convenience trade, passing trade. And so you can see the contrast between a Sunday overnight versus a Monday lunch, and you can look at the data that you can get for this. So you can really start to make those decisions. And then when you overlay income on this, then you can really get a sense for it. So let's go to another example here. So that was one idea of mobile movement data, which is really around the idea of dynamic demographics, pedestrian activity. Let's also look at another source, which is Geofence data. And this is where you want to understand the information that's specific to people or visitors, devices that have moved in and out of your parcel. And so what we can show here is we can look at grocery, geofences, and we'll look at the common evening location here, and you can definitely see areas of concentration. Common daytime location is a little bit different, because now this is where that device spends during the day. So think of it as your work or your university that you're traveling to, institutional. And then if we want to start taking a look at, okay, patterns start to jump out really quickly. You can start to see how catchments and trade areas start to take shape, how overlaps start to take shape. And this information is really, you can get this on your competitors. You can get it on yours. You can get your whole estate. And then you can start to understand where are your competitors having high visitation penetration and you're not. And so really all of that information is kind of feeding into to being able to make these really great decisions. So let's carry a situation where a typical retailer is going to decide where to locate along a street segment. You think it's an easy thing to answer, but it's really not. So let's start looking at, you start with a blank slate. You then start layering information about kind of that retail destination, right? So, okay, this is part of the high street that I want to take a look at, or this is Main Street where I want to go. Let's start to layer in traffic, right? So you're adding context, you're adding more and more information to that decision to say, hey, you know, what is the traffic at this point? Let's click on here and see what the traffic distributions are by AM, PM peak, by weekend, weekday, and get a feel for what that area looks like, right? So you're kind of building up that story. And then if we want to continue further, well, let's start to layer in the digital activity data, the dynamic demographic data that you can start to look at counts. You can start to look at, I only want to look at a Tuesday afternoon and look at total activity. I'm not interested in what their income profile is. I'm just interested in total activity. But what if you were a retailer that really targeted in on the middle income segment? You weren't interested in lower income or upper income. You had that middle income target. Well, let's start to look at, okay, this is pedestrian activity regardless of income class. This is just total people, right? Now, if I'm interested in my target, well, now this area drops off and this area becomes obvious. So if I'm locating, this is where I want to be because that's the pedestrian traffic out front my location, which is matching the segment that I have products that they're interested in purchasing. So with the advent of these types of data sets, you're able to really start to again paint that picture. And we can look at the joy of this data is that it's global in scope. And cell phone adoption is so pervasive across the globe now that you can start to get information in other areas where they were traditionally data poor, like countries where they don't have a strong census data, they don't have strong residential. So now you can look at this digital activity data. You're able to click on it and look at that counts by day of week, by day part as well, and really kind of feed that into your decision-making process. So with that, that's kind of the data aspects. I'll open it up to Jason and Thomas. Was there anything you guys wanted to add to that before I dive into kind of the enrichment side?
No, I think you've really hit the nail on the head. And what's really important here too is that data is something that traditionally most retailers, it takes teams of people months or years to really segment and make ready. And what we're going to dive into next here is really showing how we're able to take that precisely data and implement it within any retailer to really make sense without spinning a lot of cycles with your internal teams. So go ahead, I'll hand it back to Thomas. Yeah,
no, I think that's a great point. So we've touched on some data sets that we've seen, right? We showed you what traffic data can do, geodemographics, right? The expenditure, the mobility data, and then competitor POI. So these are just kind of classes, but there's others. But when you're going through the geo-enrichment process and you're looking to build these predictive models, like we said, in order to kind of make those decisions quickly, you really need to have a variety of information at your disposal. And where Precisely makes this easy is we have the concept of a Precisely ID. And so every unique location across the US has a Precisely ID. And we're able to enrich that with information around property attributes, consumption data, building footprint data, demographics, you name it. We're able to enrich that. And then you're able to have that as opposed to doing raw data processing all the time. You're linking up on a Precisely ID and you're able to extract a wealth of information within a reasonable time as you're looking to build out these models, because time is money. And when we take a look at the modeling aspect, I won't spend too much time on this, but as you're thinking of enriching, think of the different generators that are driving your performance at each location. That's across institutional, university students, you name it. Visitors, transient, businesses, shopper, retail, and residential. They all have different data elements that need to be captured and taken into account as you're building out your single view of the real estate asset, single view of the customer, because they're each going to be driving a different aspect of the business. Okay? Now, what we've seen in our experience is in the past, data that was used to power retail decisions and GIS was really static. It was limited. We actually did do exit surveys for 4 days during what we hoped was a representative time of the year, sometime in April, where there wasn't a major sporting event going on that's going to skew the results. And we would capture a small fraction of the stores. And so you would be looking to say, okay, how can I build a representative data across all my assets? So it was limiting. But now with the data, you've got the mobile movement data, the dynamic demographics data, you can build out hourly forecasting models now for a restaurant versus an average weekly sale, right? Because now you've got that information and you can start to see that mobile activity data on a Thursday, Friday, between 11 and 1 in the afternoon, and maybe sum of total unique visitors is now an important variable. So if we start to look at what's highly important that we've seen in our past with going through and leveraging data, site attributes are key, right? You still got to get that. You still got to make sure that's up to date. Your hours, your gross leasable area, your maturity, how old that unit is. But then your demographics are also important. But the wealth of the new data assets coming in needs to be taken into account, and then all of that gets ingested within various models in order to build out what it is you're forecasting. And like what we want to do, and what I like about what Blueprint does is they want to minimize that time of data capture and massaging so that you can spend the time on the strategic pieces that are really going to drive your business. Now, I would be remiss in saying that all this is easy, right? There is a lot of work that goes into making this data available in a performant fashion that you can make these decisions so that those organizations at the top, or as they're growing up that maturity ladder, how they can make these decisions. And what we're finding is a lot of our customers are moving away from the desktop GIS space. It's still important to do your ad hoc analysis, don't get me wrong. But when you need to run your business, you need to run it in the big data environment. You need to be able to do these features and do the spatial processing, which is very costly. It's a costly operation to perform these spatial functions and drive times, drive distances, radius pulls. So you need to do that within a performant environment, and we offer the tools that allow businesses like Blueprint to be able to enable that for their customers. So it's one thing to have the aspiration; it's another thing to be able to have the infrastructure in place in order to be able to support it. So just to kind of take a look at what the future holds, right? And when we can sum this up and then we can open it up for questions, is stores are here to stay. I still shop at stores. I'm always going to shop at a store. But I'm going to be spending more online, and the store is going to take on a different shape, right? My expectations is now more for convenience. I want that store to have an incremental add to my experience, not supplanting something that I can do on the web easier and more convenient in my pajamas when I'm on the couch, right? So physical stores are going to stay, but they're going to transform. Technology is really going to be a leveling for the retailers. Competition is going to intensify as people move further into the digital transformation space, so you need to get it right. But what I like is creative destruction is going to continue. The weaker player is going to close down. That's going to open up opportunity for the stronger players to move in and grow. But we're still, as Jason called out, we're still kind of growing back to the 2019 levels prior to what we've experienced. And then just down here in the bottom right, the need to make accurate data-driven decisions is just going to intensify, and you need to be able to do it quickly. So So with that, I talked a lot, but hopefully I was able to convey some critical things that I think are really important for retailers to take into account.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Paul. I mean, I think what's super important here to really hit home before we go into the Q&A is that, Precisely has this amazing amount of rich and never-ending data. And most retailers, small, medium, or global, want to have access to this data in a way that doesn't make them, like I said before, spin cycles for their engineering team or real estate teams to discover where they should put a new store or put a pop-up or where people are migrating, etc. Where the connective tissue between those two between that deliverable and that need lies is Blueprint. And what we really specialize in is enhancing and enriching that Precisely data and delivering it to the retailer in an ingestible and understandable way that helps you guys just do the work and the business that you want to do, which is increase customer service, increase that average order basket or the average order value, and then, of course, increase market share and profit margin. So that's why we're coming together to deliver that as a service and as an integration. And we hope that we can really have that opportunity with you guys. So please keep us in mind for those opportunities. And with that, I'm going to hand back to Ruthie, let her close us out with any questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. First of all, if you have any questions while I'm going over the next bit, please add that to the Q&A section. I know everything was, super in-depth and super helpful for everyone in the retail space. So if you have any questions after this, you can always email info@bpcs.com and we can make sure to get the answer to you. We will also be posting this recording on our social media, so you can follow us on social media, and we'll be posting it at latest tomorrow. And we do have something special coming up. So next week, on the 8th of October, we begin our hackathon on specifically this topic of retail and data and how you can really improve your company's data integrations and all of that, specifically in the retail space. So if you really want to see how you can maybe send a team in from your organization to really work on your data and use our data, use Precisely's data, this would be an excellent opportunity. So I'm going to add the link in the chat. So if you have any questions, you can always refer to that or email us again. This is going to be a really great opportunity to get your hands on some bespoke data from Precisely, and that would be a really fun event as well. So I'm going to add that to the chat right now. And applications for that hackathon close on the 30th. So you have 2 days to send in a team, and this would be a great event to attend. I don't see any questions in the Q&A, so we can go ahead and wrap up. But once again, I want to say thank you to all of our panelists for joining, putting all the effort into making this presentation really great. And thank you to all of the attendees for taking the time out of your day to join our webinar. And if you have any questions, once again, it is info@bpcs.com. You can also check out our website, bpcs.com. Thank you all for joining and have an awesome rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.